make a video today about a story that came out on CNN recently. Part of it came out this morning. I think the other part was maybe yesterday. But I want to do a little reaction to it from two angles. One, from the story about just the kind of turmoil that's going on in Ecuador and how it's progressed. And the other from the standpoint of someone who worked in corrections for a really long time. And that second story focuses on Fito, the gentleman that escaped or supposedly escaped from prison here, which kind of started a lot of this craziness that had been going on recently. Not to say that the crime and everything wasn't going on already, but this kind of sparked the government to really jump on the situation and basically put us where we are now here in Ecuador. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to react to a couple of videos from CNN.
FARPA assistance to Ecuador as the country wages a nationwide war against criminal gangs. The new aid under consideration ranges from equipment to deploying personnel to train security forces. The US has already pledged to help deliver 20,000 bulletproof vests and more than $1 million worth of security gear, ambulances and defense.
So I'm going to pause right there. You may be wondering where all this stuff is going. I don't know. I don't know how the U.S. is verifying where this equipment is actually going. 20,000 bulletproof vests. Like, yes, it stands to reason that some of it's going to end up in the gang's hands. Even in the U.S., those things happen. So, $1 million worth of gear and vehicles. I don't know what that means, but I will say that any help that the country can get, it's still help.
Support vehicles. The move underscores the growing concern at the White House over the increasing level of violence in Ecuador and how it could lead to more people fleeing South America for the US border. CNN's David Culver rode along with Ecuador's security forces as they carried out raids against the drug gangs, a warning his report contains images some viewers might find disturbing.
We're the fourth in a convoy of what looks to be about 4 pickup trucks, all of them unmarked, no lights, no sirens, all the officers in plain clothes.
We're with Ecuador's National Police Force as they're dispatched to a house with suspected ties to terror groups. They won't tell us where exactly we're headed, and they ask us to blur their faces.
Shows you the level of concern.
The officers have really good reason to fear for their own safety.
Keep it vague. We're just outside Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest city, and headed into one of the most violent areas, Duran. More than a dozen officers storm what could be
These little shacks that you see on the side of the road, you see a lot of these when you're riding up and down the highways here in Ecuador. I'm not even sure what they're called. I wouldn't even dare to guess, but you see a lot of these. And when these guys rolled up on one, I almost laughed a little bit, because it's one of those things when you see them, you're like, okay, is it like a little barn? Is it like a little shack for the people who are maintaining the field? Because they're usually in like farms. But just to see that there was some criminal activity going on, this one is it'll make me think about it next time I see one of these.
Taken for an abandoned barn, but their intel suggests otherwise. They cuffed 2 men and searched the high grass and weeds. On each corner, security cameras strategically positioned. Officers hack them down.
Security cameras, telltale sign of someone being very cautious for whatever reason.
He's carrying some evidence. Looks like a gun and several rounds in that baggie.
This is just one of thousands of raids across Ecuador carried out over the past 2 weeks. Ecuador's military now deployed to neighborhoods. We went with them.
Over here, we see 2 guys who have been detained for now.
Officials arresting more than 3,000 people so far. Ecuador's latest surge in violence sparked by the suspected prison escape of notorious gang leader José Adolfo Macías, known as Fito, reported missing from this massive prison compound on January 7th.
If you look over here, this is where officials tell us Fito was being held, possibly is still being held. They really don't know.
A top military commander telling me the prison system is rife with mismanagement and heavy gang influence. So much so that Fito could still be hiding inside.
Pause. Yeah, the prisons here, coming from my background, the level of control that the inmates have at these prisons is pretty insane. They essentially run it. And there does need to be a major overhaul in the correction system here in the country. I'm not really down with cruelty to inmates or just treating them bad. I've seen too much. I've been around too much to think that that's a good thing. But there definitely needs to be more control, and it definitely needs to be better facilities. Of course, all these things take money, and something that the country doesn't have in abundance. So hopefully they're able to get the prisons under control while also, maintaining some level of humanity.
Fito's disappearance led President Daniel Noboa to declare a state of emergency, vowing to neutralize terror groups. A day after Noboa's declaration, on January 9th, 13 armed men took over a television news studio in Guayaquil. They put guns to the heads of employees, forcing them to the ground, and held up what looked to be sticks of dynamite. Folks watched it all unfold on live TV. Among them, Camille Gamarra and her husband Diego Gallardo. Feeling the unease, Diego decided to pick up their 10-year-old son. But minutes before reaching his school, someone opened fire on the streets. Diego stopped messaging Camille, who was frantically trying to call him. A police colonel eventually answered and told Camille Diego had been shot. Chaos rocked Ecuador that day, especially in Guayaquil, where barricades went up and streets shut down. This young girl, still in her school uniform, also hit by a stray bullet. The hospital later saying she survived thanks to a security guard who drove her to the emergency room. A family friend was able to get Camille's son to safety, but Diego died before Camille could get to him.
De no poder hacer nada, de quedarme sentada sin poder hacer nada.
Across town, National Police and armed forces stormed the television studio, capturing the gunmen before they could kill any of the hostages.
And this is the studio where the terror group entered, and 13 of them.
We saw firsthand the damage left behind.
So this is the studio door, and you can see, I can count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about a half dozen bullet holes.
The day after our visit, in a brazen strike against the government, suspected gang members assassinated the prosecutor investigating that studio takeover.
You can see he's pulling this car.
Okay, so yeah, the prosecutor that was investigating that studio takeover was assassinated, which is one of those things that, even though the government has done a pretty good job of settling some of the turmoil that's going on and easing people's fears a bit, it's still dangerous. It's still dangerous for the people who are out there fighting this, the prosecutors, the police officers, the military. And, it's just a sign that this isn't over, and it isn't nearly over, and there's still a lot of work to be done.
Over right now.
Police and military now stepping up their efforts, setting up random checkpoints. Every possible hiding place searched.
I just saw one of the soldiers signaling to the other, look at his arm, look at his arm.
They check tattoos for any gang affiliations and even scroll through people's phones. They also board commuter buses to get intel.
He's asking, do they have anything they need to tell him or inform about? He says, we're doing this operation for you all.
Residents here.
I'm going to pause right there. As you can see here in Ecuador, you don't get the same level of rights that you might have in the United States. Not to say that things in the United States are great by any means, but a police officer won't typically just take your phone and start scrolling through it. And if they do, they're going to need a warrant. There's a whole process for that. They'd be breaking a lot of rules and laws if they just start taking people's stuff and scrolling through it without permission. So, yeah, here, I've witnessed them just pull guys over and, make them take their shirts off, search them, and do things that it wouldn't happen like that in the U.S. However, it is somewhat effective. I don't even know where I exactly sit on this because it is kind of a human rights issue. But at the same time, they have a crisis that they need to try to take care of. So I can see both arguments here.
Struggle with what's happened to their country over the past few years. They tell me gangs are growing bolder and holding people and their businesses hostage, demanding protection money, known as vacunas.
What happens if you don't pay the vacuna, if you don't pay the extortion?
They get a contract killer and kill you. They put an explosive outside your store.
The military tries to weed out those responsible, raiding.
It's really dangerous for business owners because, if they get threatened, like their lives are in danger, their livelihood is in danger. This is something that's been around for a long time. In the States, we know there's protection money, and the mob used this to great effect for a long time, and it's probably still going on now. I don't know too much about that, but it's definitely a serious issue here because the gangs know they can get away with it.
Homes like this one, holding the suspects at gunpoint as neighbors, including kids, watch. It's a lot to take in.
She says the fact that there are police here, it's comforting. She accepts that, and that there's military now patrolling the streets. What she doesn't like is that it goes into people's homes and it's now pouring out onto the street.
But this is war. At least that's how the government here sees it. And they're asking the U.S. for support, desperate for tax.
See, that's what I was saying, that it's great that they're here. It's great that they're visible, that they're doing their job. At the same time, it's disrupting the lives of a lot of innocent people as well. So, people they're on the fence about it because on one hand, they really appreciate it. But on the other hand, they're like, hey, I ain't got nothing to do with this. Why are you interrupting my life? So we'll see how far this goes.
Tactical equipment, ammo, and intel.
Why should the U.S. help? Because people will look at this from the U.S. and they'll say, well, that's Ecuador's problem.
I mean, if you don't help us, probably you will see more people trying to cross the borders because these people is in the middle of gunfights on their neighborhoods. What would you do?
You're not going to stay there.
You don't want to stay there.
Back on the front lines after executing their raid, we're reminded of the fear instilled by these gangs, even among law enforcement. This officer putting on a ski mask in 90-degree heat and thick humidity before stepping into frame. And yet beneath those tactical layers, a soft spot. This soldier's not been home in a week, telling us the reason he's fighting is for his little girl. She wrote him a letter in English.
I want you to know that everyone misses you here at home, and we want you to return safe and sound. And I ask you to help the country to be a better place.
I really feel for a lot of these soldiers and police officers. They have a tougher job than you can imagine. The ones that haven't, subjected themselves to corruption. So that was the first video, and just to get my thoughts on it, I do appreciate a lot of, and this is just coming from someone who makes YouTube videos, I appreciate a lot of their B-roll footage of just people living their lives. Because even with all the things that are going on, people are still living their lives here, and there's just that air of worry about, the crime and the gangs and the corruption. But the government is trying to fix it. There's a lot of work to do, y'all. There's a lot of work to do. The president doesn't have long before he has to run for re-election again, because you got to remember he stepped in, mid-cycle. So he isn't getting his full term as president until he runs again. At which time he'll have a lot longer to get some of these things in place. But right now he is going, head first and trying to do as much as he can. So let's get into the next video. All right, we're going to start on the second video, and this one's about Fito and his escape from prison and how he was living in prison. And I have a few things I want to say about that.
It's as though they're stepping into a war zone. Ecuador's military and national police trail an armored vehicle in a raid of one of the country's 35 prisons. Inside, prisoners stripped down, hands tied.
This is stuff you won't see in the
played out
States.
across Ecuador over the past few weeks. The armed forces making a very public show of force, attempting to reinstate order within their own prisons.
Also, no uniforms. That's another big thing that's
Ecuador's
different.
effort to neutralize terror groups and weed out gangs, which have unleashed chaos nationwide, from a live TV studio armed takeover to random shootings in the streets. This most recent surge in violence sparked by the suspected escape of this man, Jose Adolfo Macias, known as Fito. On January 7th, officials reported that while serving a 34-year sentence for murder and drug trafficking, the notorious gang leader vanished from this prison in Guayaquil. A drone's view allows us to grasp the scale of this complex. It is sprawling.
Not really much of a prison uniform. They're all kind of in their own clothes.
I'm gonna pause that. From a prison standpoint, it's just not even located in a good place. It's really too close to a high major roadway and neighborhoods and things of that nature. There are plans for a couple of new prisons around the country, a couple of supermax prisons with some technology to help block cell phone signals and things like that. Yeah, they do well to not have prisons located in places like that. Just like the airport. The airport in Guayaquil is actually going to be moved. They're building a new airport for outside the city because the current airport is right in the middle of the city. And it's just a bad place for it.
Officials tell us it's made up of 5 different prisons. Through military and prison sources, we get a sense of the layout. We learn the women are kept here. These buildings house the men, and they range from minimum to medium security. And over here, maximum security, known as La Roca, or the Rock. With a military escort, we go past the first of 3 perimeters. Any farther, we're told, too dangerous, even with armed soldiers. We're told inmates are separated based on gang affiliation and are essentially self-ruled.
And you can see behind one of these gates, folks kind of moving comfortably and casually from cell to cell. It's kind of an indoor-outdoor complex.
CNN obtaining these videos from inside. By prison standards, they reveal a life of luxury for Fito, the drug kingpin. The images captured last year by members of Ecuador's military. They appear to show Fito's cell.
Now, just speaking on his cell, I've seen a lot of jail cells, and it is definitely a lot better. And it is a hell of a lot better than most Ecuadorians are dealing with in prison and jail. This guy obviously had a lot of connections. There's obviously a lot of corruption going on. He's living like, the guys in Goodfellas when they were in prison. You're going to see here some of the other amenities that he had going on.
Messy, but complete with home comforts. A mini fridge, a queen bed, upscale shower fittings, artwork featuring an image of Fito himself with guns and cash. He lives like a king. You can hear one of the soldiers say in this video, obtained by CNN and verified by Ecuador's military. Outside, his own courtyard, and a half-dozen fighting roosters believed to be his. A military source tells us Fito had fresh fish imported for his meals, and somehow even managed to shoot a music video from within the prison walls.
So I'm gonna pause that. Yeah, this guy had fighting roosters. So, obviously there's some cockfighting going on in prison, and he's probably making some substantial money off it. Like I said, none of this is possible without the cooperation and corruption of officials in the prison system. And honestly, I'm going to be perfectly honest about the guards that work here. These are men and women that are just trying to do a job, and if they're being threatened by someone who has all the power, they're going to go along. I can't even be mad with them, especially if it's hard for them to find any other line of work, because it's, come to work, do your job, I'll slide you a little extra money and not kill you. If that's your option, then what are you going to do? You're not left with many options. Now, some of the upper officials, they may have the same option, honestly, we might kill you. But the corruption has to stop somewhere. And, you know, once it's rooted out of like the judicial system, it kind of work its way down. So the government and judicial system, you got to get rid of the corruption there, and it'll work its way down. Because as long as, you know, gang leaders know that, well, I can bribe the guards, I can bribe the warden, I can bribe the prosecutors, I can bribe the judges. What's to stop them from bribing the guards? Nothing. There's no level above them that's going to stop it. So you got to start from the top and work your way down.
Ecuavisa showing these images of Fito's 42nd birthday in 2022. The prisoners
This dude
reportedly
in the
enjoyed
prison
cake,
dropping heat.
music, and drinks. The night capped off with fireworks.
And fireworks, that's insane. Like, that's truly insane.
Marriott hotel room. Ecuador's president, Daniel
Birthday
Lopez,
fireworks are a
said
big
last
thing here.
year. So why escape? Ecuadorian security experts believe that Fito was tipped off that he was going to be transferred in the same complex back to the Rock, maximum security. Fito spent a few weeks in the Rock last year, moving him
Which,
there
why wasn't he
involved an
there?
estimated 4,000
He was probably
police
moved
and soldiers.
due to some kind of corruption to
Sudden
begin with.
disappearance, suggesting he wasn't ready to leave the comforts of his cell. The government's focus now is to reassert control within, but it won't be easy. Prison raids have turned up everything from laptops
You know,
to guns.
Hoy presento los diseños aprobados para la...
Noboa also announcing the construction of new prisons, designed by the same company behind El Salvador's notorious mega prisons, where thousands of suspected gang members are locked up.
and this is a move that a lot of
Outside
Ecuadorians
the prison
like,
in
honestly.
Guayaquil,
They love the president
Here.
of El Salvador.
There's church services going on, some sort of religious ceremony, loudspeakers.
soldiers and police stand guard on the perimeter, knowing that it's often the gangs who still dictate what happens on the inside. David Culver, CNN, Guayaquil, Ecuador.
Yeah, the prison system needs a major overhaul. Hopefully those new prisons that are going to be built, I don't know when they're actually going to be built. Hopefully it's before Daniel Noboa leaves office. Don't know if it's going to actually solve the issue because, like I said, you can have all the prisons you want, but there's still a lot of corruption and it's not going to matter. I would never try to say that America does prison right, but in comparison, we do prison right. Because there's still a lot of problems in American prison. But there at least is a level of control. And when things get out of control, it is much easier to get it back under control. Ecuador's got a serious problem, and hopefully it gets ironed out. You know, we like this country, so I just wish the best. Hopefully they work on that corruption and make it so that the gangs and the narcos just find it less profitable to even deal with Ecuador to begin with, and they move on. I'm not saying I want them to go to some other country and mess that up, but just move on from here. So those are my thoughts. Those are videos. You can go to CNN and try to watch those videos in full if you like. But any comments, questions, leave them down below. Thanks.